Hello whisky fans, and welcome to day 6 of the Master of Malt Drinks by the Dram Whisky Advent Calendar. Let's jump straight in and see if we can find something a little bit better than the 40% ABV Glenrothes that we had yesterday. I think we may have a new contender for top place. Oh, such irony. So today we've got Whistlepig 10-year-old straight rye whiskey. So this is 50% ABV, and for those of you that don't know, Whistlepig is a really nice whiskey, but it's one that really defies categorization a little bit because it's not a bourbon. So if I remember rightly, the Whistlepig 10-year-old straight rye is a semi-sourced whiskey, because the Whistlepig distillery in Vermont in the USA sources rye whiskey from a distillery in Canada across the border, and they get the Canadian distillery to do the mashing, the distilling, and some of the maturation, and then they ship it across the border to the Whistlepig distillery in Vermont, where they kind of finish it, but my understanding is that most of the maturation is done across the border in America. So it probably explains a little bit as to why this is called a straight rye whiskey, because you can't call it a bourbon, you can't really call it a Canadian whiskey. So other than demanding a brand new category just for this whiskey, calling it a straight rye whiskey is probably about as simple and straightforward as you're going to get. But whenever I've tried any Whistlepig whiskey in the past, it's always been really, really good. So let's crack this one open, get it in a glass. Already that's really interesting. More than happy with that one. Thank you, Master of Malt. So let's see how it noses. There is quite a lot of woodiness on the nose of this. It's woody and spicy. You can tell that this is a rye whiskey. There's definitely quite a bit of rye on the mash bill of this one, because you are getting that distinct spicy, grassy note that you always get, or almost always get, on rye whiskies. Wow. So, huge intense notes of that grassy rye spice. And you're also getting quite a lot of lemoniness as well, which again is something that I always get on a rye whiskey, but it's so different from the majority of American rye whiskies that you get, because I think this is something that I mentioned in my review of the Bullet rye whiskey. A lot of American rye whiskey is sourced, but it all comes from the same place. It's a place called MGP, Indiana. And to be fair, they make really good rye whiskey, but the downside to the majority of rye whiskey being sourced from the same place is that it can all be a little bit similar, and this really isn't. Amongst the grassiness and the wood spice, you're getting some really quite unusual floral notes as well. It's like a whole bouquet of flowers, and some really interesting notes of silage as well. For the less rurally inclined of you out there, you may not know what silage is. It's basically cut and dried grass. Animal feed. There's also some quite peppery notes in there. The pepperiness on this one, it mixes really well with this nice vanilla, creamy, biscuity, grainy, cereally note. And it actually reminds me a little bit of some Glen Scotias, especially some of the previous bottlings of Glen Scotia. They had this really nice combination of pepperiness and this creamy, butyric, vanilla, seaside brininess. What I was saying about this whiskey needing its entire category to itself is really quite fitting, because it is really unique. It's not like any other bourbon or Canadian whiskey that I've ever had before. There are definitely some mineral notes in there as well, though. There's definitely a coastal note to it. It's also quite a sweet nose as well, though. Some lovely sweet floral notes, as I said before, some quite nice sweet violets and sweet and fruity peaches, like perhaps sweetened tinned peaches, as well as some notes of vanilla and coconut, and I'm sure that those would probably be coming mainly from the casks that this has matured in. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that this has matured in brand new virgin American white oak, the same as most bourbon is. But because it's not a bourbon, that it's really its own beast, unless the distillery tells us, I really don't know what those casks are for sure. It's got a wonderful colour to it. Now, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that's a natural colour, and it looks like the sort of colour that you get from an American whiskey that's spent quite a while in the cask. There's also a lovely nutty confectionery note to this whiskey. It's those nougat bars that you get, the things that are chopped up into rectangles, and I don't actually know what they're made of. It's like hard marshmallow with nuts and pure sugar in them, but the sweet vanilla nuttiness that I'm getting in this whiskey, it really reminds me of those things. Probably just are made of sugar and nuts. But yeah, it's really reminding me of that. So I don't know how long I've been recording this video now, quite a while, fair few minutes, and I haven't even got around to tasting it yet, because the nose is that complex and that lovely. This could be, I know I said I was going to keep these videos short, but this could be the longest video yet in the Advent Calendar series. So let's get on, let's taste this whiskey, see if the palate can keep up with the nose. So on the palate, getting quite some floral notes, a little bit of Parma Violet. The Parma Violet is more clear, whereas on the nose it's more of a general floral nose, and plenty of that spiciness as well. And I think that's partly wood spice from the cask and partly spice from that rye that goes into this. Also some lemony notes. I'm just going to have a bit more. And it's actually quite dry and astringent. I would say that this is not an accessible beginner's whiskey, and I say that because of the ABV, which I believe is 50%, yeah, so 100 US proof, but also because of how dry and grassy and spicy and astringent this whiskey is. It's probably not one for people that are not accustomed to higher strength or the more mature, and I don't mean mature as in old, I mean that this whiskey is perhaps for those of us that are a little bit more experienced. Right, I'm going to have another sip. The mouthfeel is phenomenal on this whiskey. Although it's dry and astringent and grassy and spicy, all of these hard characters, it's also really syrupy. It's got a lovely coating mouthfeel, and it has got quite a lot of sweetness as well, but that sweetness, whereas me personally, I think that a lot of bourbons can be a little bit on the overly sweet and cloying side, but this isn't at all. This is much more to my tastes, to be honest, because everything's just so well balanced. You've got that sweetness and the dryness, and they don't fight each other, they don't overwhelm each other, they're just everything in perfect unison. Just going back to the nose, the spicy, woody grassiness on the nose, it's got a real sawdust, like freshly sawn sawdust and wood chips aroma to it. But it's not planky, it doesn't drown out everything else, it just works really well. It's a really nice earthiness to the grassy quality in this whiskey. It's quite salty as well. I think I mentioned possibly on the nose that I was getting a brininess, and there is definitely a saltiness to this whiskey on the palate. It's kind of like salty ginger. As for the finish, I was going to say medium long, but it's pretty long finish. And it's a lovely smooth and sweet finish with some really nice spicy, earthy, grassy notes that really linger. I don't think this whiskey's going to be for everyone, but that dry, astringent grassiness is something that I really appreciate. So This is getting really interesting now. I honestly don't know where I'm going to fit this one in on the leaderboard. That one might take some thought. You can tell it's a rye whiskey, but it really is such a unique thing. And it's one of my favourite things that they make on the other side of the pond. I'm really interested to hear what you guys at home think of the Whistlepig 10-year-old and Whistlepig in general. In my opinion, it's really good stuff. I'm going to go and finish this and enjoy it properly now. Hope to see you next time. Cheers.